Hi guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome to another video. So yeah, in this video I am going to do a ranking video for you, and I'm going to rank all of the Planet of the Apes movies. So that includes the original 5 movies from the 60s and 70s, the Tim Burton remake, and also the recent trilogy that we've had. And I just want to give a special shout out to a good friend of mine by the name of Sam Glendenning. He is someone that I talk to regularly on Instagram, social media. We talk a lot about movies, about Blu-rays that we've picked up. We have a lot of the same interests and opinions about particular movies, and we have had him on a couple of live streams as well. And yeah, like I said, he's a great guy, great friend, and has a great taste in movies. So Sam, thank you for this suggestion, and I'm quite surprised that I've never thought to do this video myself, because I am a massive fan of this franchise. So yeah, there are 9 movies in total, and I'm going to go from my least favourite, number 9, all the way to my favourite, which will be number 1. So yeah, let's just get straight into it. So kicking it off in 9th place, I'm going to go with Planet of the Apes, the Tim Burton remake from 2001. And yeah, this is probably not a surprise for a lot of people, because I know this is generally considered to be the weakest Planet of the Apes movie, and yeah, it's not hard to argue with that, really. To be fair, when I first saw this movie, I was about 10 or 11 years old, and I saw it in the cinema, and I was a mega Planet of the Apes fan by that point, and I loved it. I loved it the first time I saw this movie. I just had a great time with it. But over the years, every time I've revisited it, I have always found it a bit of a struggle, and it doesn't quite work as a movie. I think visually and from a production point of view, it's great. The effects are great. The makeup from Rick Baker, I believe, is great. And I think this movie does do enough to try and be different and not try to be just a cut and paste remake of the original movie. But at the same time, I just find the story not that engaging. I don't care for any of the characters in this movie, and it's just a very dull, very lifeless movie. And every time I watch it, it just gets to a point where I just want to get to the end. I don't really care about anything that's happening on the screen. It's not a terrible movie per se. It's just not a great one. And yeah, it's just quite dull and quite boring, even though it is visually and from a production point of view very good. But yeah, it's a very misguided attempt to remake the original movie. So yeah, that's why I have to put it in 9th place. Right, so into 8th place now, and I'm going to go with Battle for the Planet of the Apes. This was the last movie in the original series of films from the 60s and the 70s. Now, I just want to say, I do generally have a good time with this movie. There are certain things I do like about it, but at the same time, it feels like a very disappointing way to end the original series of films. I think originally the producers had plans to make this like an epic conclusion, but then in the end, they were kind of hampered by budget constraints. And you can definitely tell that on the screen. Everything looks very cheap. The whole movie takes place in a field, basically. There's not that many actors in the ape makeup, and it just has a very sort of TV movie kind of quality to it. And at the same time, it feels like they just didn't know what to do with the story, so they just kind of came up with a very basic idea, and the final battle at the end is just very unengaging, unexciting, and just kind of boring to watch. There are things I do like about it, though. I do like Roddy McDowall as Caesar. I think the villain, Aldo, I think his name is, I think he's a pretty good villain. Although saying that, I do find him kind of funny, and I think I like him for different reasons. There's a scene in particular at the beginning of the movie where he's in a classroom and he's having a lot of trouble trying to write the word ape. And I just find that scene hysterical, but it's probably all for the wrong reasons. But like I said, there are things I do like about this movie, but on the whole, it does feel like a very weak way to end the original series. So for that reason, I have to put it into 8th place. Right, so into 7th place now, and I'm going to go with a movie that might be quite a controversial one, but I'm going to go with War for the Planet of the Apes. This is currently the most recent Planet of the Apes movie, and currently the last one in this recent trilogy of movies that we've had. Now, like I said, I know a lot of people really like this movie, and there are things that are good about it. Andy Serkis is great as Caesar. Woody Harrelson makes a good villain. Cinematography wise, it's very good, and it's bookended by two fantastic action sequences. But on the whole, I find this movie a bit too slow and a little bit too long. And it has a very somber, depressing kind of tone to it that didn't really gel with me. I was expecting a lot more action in this movie, considering the fact that it's called War for the Planet of the Apes. And yeah, I just didn't really have a good time with it the first time I saw it. And every time I revisit it, I just find it a bit of a slog to get through. But like I said, there are a lot of great things about it, and maybe on a revisit it will get better for me. But as it stands, I have to put it into 7th place. Right, so into 6th place now, and I'm going to go with Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. This was the 4th movie in the original series of films, and the first one to introduce us to Caesar, played by Roddy McDowall. Now, when I was a kid, this was the movie that I always revisited the least. I used to find it quite dark and quite upsetting, certainly as a child. It's very violent in places, it's got a very depressing tone, and there are certain scenes in this movie that I find quite hard to watch. There's a torture sequence in particular, which I don't enjoy watching even to this day. But as I've gotten older, this movie has grown for me. I do like the more sort of political stance that this movie has. I think aesthetically, it's one of the best looking movies. I love the use of different coloured costumes for the different species of apes. I love the set designs in this movie. I really like the villain. He's a great villain that you love to hate. And Roddy McDowall is fantastic as Caesar, of course. And I think this movie has a really solid first half. I really enjoy all of the scenes where Caesar is trying to mingle, but then at the same time he's still trying to hide his true nature from all of his enemies, and it makes for some really engaging storytelling. But where the movie falls flat for me is in its second half. I find a lot of the action sequences when the ape uprising starts, I find a lot of that quite dull and quite boring and not really directed with much flair. But it does have a pretty cool ending, a very dark ending, and if you've got the movie on Blu-ray, you can watch it with the even darker ending, which is pretty cool. It's not a great movie, but I don't think it's a bad movie either. It very much falls in the middle for me. But yeah, that's why I have to put Conquest of the Planet of the Apes into 6th place. Right, so into 5th place now, and this is probably going to be another controversial choice from me, but I'm going to go with Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. For me, personally, I think this is the most overrated movie in the franchise. Having said that, I do think there is a lot of great things about it, but some of the negatives for me is that I don't really like the setting of this movie. 90% of the movie takes place in this dense forest, and a lot of the scenes take place at the apes' home where they live in the forest. And I just don't really care for the location, the backdrop. I just find it a bit boring to watch on the screen. I would have liked them to use a lot more locations in this movie. But having said that, I think the story is really solid. The cinematography is beautiful in this movie. I like the characters. I really like the protagonist-antagonist dynamic with Caesar and Cobra. It's probably one of the best sort of rivalries in the entire Apes franchise. And it's got a lot of great action sequences. I do think it's a really enjoyable movie, don't get me wrong, but there's just a few things that kind of set it back for me, as well as the setting. I think, like War for the Planet of the Apes, it can be a bit long in places, and certain sequences bog this movie down. But on the whole, I still think it is a really enjoyable entry in the franchise, and that's why it falls into 5th place. Right, so into 4th place now, and I'm going to go with Beneath the Planet of the Apes. This was the first sequel in the original Apes series, and it's probably the most divisive, most controversial movie in the entire franchise. I know some people who love this movie, and I know some people who absolutely hate this movie. On the whole, I really enjoy this one. It's a very flawed movie, don't get me wrong. I think the first half in particular is not that great. They basically just introduce a new character, and the first half of the movie is just kind of just doing the same that they did in the original Planet of the Apes movie. It's pretty much the same plot, but in a much more condensed fashion. But where this movie gets interesting for me is in the second half, when the protagonists go underground and we meet the mutants and the atomic bomb. The movie goes into some really strange and bizarre places, and I know it doesn't sit well for some people, but for me, I really like it, and I really like the ending to this movie. I think it's so ballsy, and just a really cool way to end the movie. I think James Franciscus is the main character. I think he does a pretty good job with what he's given. He's no Charlton Heston, but I think he's a really solid lead. And it's a very violent movie as well, and there's a lot of really graphic stuff in that second half. But yeah, I just have a really good time with it. Like I said, it's very weird, very surreal, but I enjoy it nonetheless. And I also have a bit of a nostalgic soft spot for this movie because this was the first Planet of the Apes movie that I ever saw as a kid. And for a while, I used to think it was the original Planet of the Apes movie, but obviously not. So yeah, I do have a nostalgic soft spot for it, but on the whole, I do enjoy a lot of this movie. So yeah, that's why I have to put it into fourth place. Right, so into third place now, and I'm going to go with Rise of the Planet of the Apes. This was the first movie in the brand new trilogy that we got, starting in 2011, I think it was. Now, like I said earlier, with Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and I think it's the most overrated of the franchise, I think this movie is the most underrated of the franchise. I think it kind of falls under the shadow of Dawn and War of the Planet of the Apes. But for me, I think this one is the best of the three. I really like how they try to reimagine basically the plot to Escape from the Planet of the Apes and Conquest, and they reimagine it in a more modern setting and put a different spin on the story. And I really dig it. I really like the direction this movie takes. I like a lot of the characters in it. Andy Serkis is great, of course, as Caesar. And I really love the second half of this movie. Some of the action sequences are fantastic. I love, in particular, the ending sequence on the Golden Gate Bridge. I think for me, it's probably the best action sequence in the entire franchise. I just think it's awesome. And yeah, I don't really have much more to say on it. I think it's a really solid film. I don't have too much complaints about it. It's not as good as the two movies I'm going to mention in a minute, but it's one of the very best in the franchise for me. So yeah, that is Rise of the Planet of the Apes in third place. Right, so into second place now, and I'm going to go with Escape from the Planet of the Apes. This was the third movie in the original series of films, and for me, this is the best sequel in the entire franchise. I know some people have issues with this film because of the way it follows on from Beneath the Planet of the Apes, and it might feel like a bit of a cop-out to some, but I don't really care about that. I just think this movie, on the whole, is really, really enjoyable. I really enjoy Roddy McDowall and Kim Hunter. I think they're really charming together as Cornelius and Zira. I really enjoy the first half of the movie where they're on Earth, and the tone of the movie is kind of comical, but I just love it when it moves into that second half and the movie goes from being kind of a comedy to a really serious drama. And it gets very, very tense at the end of this movie, and you really start to worry about their characters because they are so likable. And this movie has probably the bleakest ending of the entire franchise, but every time I watch it, the ending just gives me chills. I honestly think it's a perfect movie. I just have such a good time with it. I don't have any complaints about it. And for me, it is the best sequel in the franchise. So yeah, that is Escape from the Planet of the Apes in second place. Right, so we're into first place now. And in first place, it is, of course, the original Planet of the Apes from 1967. Yeah, this is just a classic sci-fi movie. As a kid, this movie terrified me. The whole idea behind it, I found it so scary. And even to this day, the idea behind this movie still scares me. And I always wonder, what will the future be like? And will it be as it's depicted in this movie? I've always found that really fascinating. Charlton Heston makes a great protagonist as Taylor. I really love a lot of the other characters like Cornelius, Zira, Dr. Zaius. The music from Jerry Goldsmith is just iconic, and it really fits the tone of the movie so, so well. And of course, we have that iconic twist ending. It's just legendary, isn't it? Um, yeah, it's a fantastic movie. 5 stars, one of my all-time favorites, and it was always going to be the top spot for me. But yeah, that is the original Planet of the Apes in first place. Right, guys, so there you go. That is my ranking for the entire Planet of the Apes movie franchise. Once again, I want to say thank you so much, Sam, for suggesting this video. I've had a great time doing it, and I hope you guys have enjoyed watching it. Let me know in the comments below if you've seen the Planet of the Apes movies. What do you think of them? How would you rank the movies? What's your favorite? What's your least favorite? I would really love to hear your thoughts. But yeah, once again, I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I will see you all again on the next one. So take care, guys.